All right. Hey, good evening. All right. So, if you don't know me, my name is Monique Young. I go by the student support coach. And tonight's live, we are talking about thousands of dollars in BIST. Where are the outcomes? Now, let me just introduce myself a little bit. Like I said, I go by the student support coach, and that is a school mental health consulting business where I am helping student support staff, particularly K through 8, transform their discipline referrals into positive social emotional development. Now, I do have a background as a professional school counselor as well as a student services coordinator. And I feel like this topic was so important. Student behavior intervention is my jam, y'all. I facilitated over 200 student interventions with measured positive growth. This is just a topic that I love so much anytime we're talking about behavior and intervention, right? So, like I said, a lot of this conversation tonight is centered around BIST. If you don't know what BIST is an acronym that stands for Behavior Intervention Support Team. Now, I was doing my research, right, just to make sure I got my facts and all of that. But BIST was actually started in the 1990s, which I figured. But what I did not know was that this originated in Kansas City, and I'm a Kansas City girl. Like, didn't know that. So now it's starting to make sense why there's still this heavy presence of BIST in a lot of schools. But I will say, like from the website, so I'm reading it. It says that BIST empowers educators and parents to help children to develop emotional awareness and positive coping skills. BIST also provides support for schools to develop a cohesive, like minded community that works in collaboration to increase consistency of care for all children as well as adults. Now, as we are talking about BIST, they do have certain values, right, that they uh, align their schools with, and they also use it as instruction for teacher to student on how we conduct ourselves in the classroom, what the expectations are. And these are the three goals. I can make good choices even if I'm mad. I can be okay even if others are not okay. And I can do something even if I don't want to. So if you've heard that language before, right, you may not have known, but again, this comes from the BIST model. And so, why is this important? Or why is this whole topic, right? Why am I in business? Because school districts are spending upwards of $20,000 to $35,000 a school year on BIST training for their staff. And here's my thing: I'm not mad about the price. As a consultant, I am not mad about the price. But as somebody who has been employed at schools who follow the BIST model, my thing is that these schools still experience significant behavior challenges. Now, that's not to say that BIST does not work. That I can't really say yes or no. However, what I can speak from experience is saying that, hey, I've worked at a school who's had BIST model, a couple of different schools, right? And here's some of the themes that I'm seeing with that. Okay. So, like I said, we're going to talk more about that tonight, but I want to ask you, have you found success or significant transformation with implementation of the BIST model now or at a past school site? Because, like I said, if it's something that started in the 90s, that's still kind of fairly new, right? Kind of on the older side. But like I said, some schools may have seen success. According to BIST, they do find schools that have success in relation to a decrease in office discipline referrals. Um, just wasn't my experience at the schools that I was at that adopted BIST. But again, I just want to know from y'all. But let's drop into our first topic tonight, which is why are schools drawn to the BIST model, right? So again, in doing that research and finding out that this was started actually in the 1990s in Kansas City, right? But also it started by a group of counselors who worked at Ozanam specifically. If you don't know, Ozanam is a like alternative setting for students who, quote unquote, could not be successful in a general school setting. And so like I said, they created this model, and it's the early 90s where it was adopted, right? Or when it was originated, which makes me think about, if you've studied the history of schools, in the 80s is when there were way more punitive policies and practices in schools, especially with like the crackdown of the drug administration. And so we started to see expulsions, we started to see student hearings and things of that nature. So when BIST started to get presented as a new model, it was definitely like a 180. It was way less punitive because they claim that it's started as an approach to be more proactive rather than reactive. And they want to give students the skills that they might be missing. And trust me, I definitely agree with that, because it also is backed by research and by science that, hey, sometimes students don't have the skills to do what you're asking them to do. If you provide and teach them those skills, you're going to see a decrease in some of the unwanted behaviors that may be happening. So, again, that's kind of how BIST is set up. But also, BIST aligns with the MTSS structure. So, not only are they providing support through ongoing coaching to teachers throughout the year, right? They give actions for admin and supporting staff, typically through those restorative rooms, the think sheets, things of that nature, and they require a plan for individual students with consistent challenges. So you're seeing that clear presence of tier one, tier two, and tier three, right? Now, like I said, MTSS is something that is very prevalent still in schools. So whether it's through PBIS, whether it's through RTI, if you're adopting that BIS model, it clearly kind of aligns with those things and it doesn't create friction. That's always good. That's always a good sign when we're looking to adopt something, right? But then lastly, and I feel like most importantly, why schools are drawn to BIST is that it provides a structured continuum of response. And baby, admin, y'all love a continuum. I'm telling you, y'all love a continuum. And here's why I think so. In particular to BIST, right? It provides a temporary assurance to teaching staff that a student is being provided a consequence. So the way that BIST is set up is that it has, again, this structured continuum response, right? And so it says that one, you're supposed to ask a student to stop disruptive behavior. You only ask it once. From there, if a student doesn't comply, you move on to the next step, which is facilitating a caring confrontation. I see that X, Y, and Z. Could you please X, Y, and Z? From there, if the student is still not complying, you create a protective plan for the student. Again, that's that individual plan for students with consistent behavior challenges, right? And then four, it says to outlast the acting out behavior. So you see how there's a clear 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now, I talked about this in a reel the other evening where I was saying that in working with teachers and having to teach teachers new concepts, what I really find sometimes as a place of, I don't want to say contingency, but like sometimes where there's some roughness or there's some difficulty, is because a lot of times teachers are very black and white. Tell me what I'm supposed to do when X happens so that I can have X response. When Y response happens, tell me what response I'm supposed to have. Because if behavior in particular is a subject that isn't widely taught, and most of y'all are educators on my LinkedIn, so you know that in educator preparation programs, it's more so, specifically teachers, that is more so geared towards the curriculum, not necessarily behavior. Like there's a lot to be wanted or a lot more to be given in the area of behavior when it comes to teacher preparation programs, right? And so, again, if this is an area that does not feel comfortable to teachers, then they want a specific response. How does it look? How does it sound? What do you want me to say? And what do you want me to do? If not, I'm going to be confused or I'm just going to forego the instruction altogether. Okay. But again, either way, whether you feel like it works or not, it still is a structured response. So, my question for you is, were you aware that BIST had these core values in practices. And this isn't even all of them. Like I touched on some, but we'll touch on some more because I feel like it's really important when we talk about my next point, which is where implementation falls apart. Okay. Now, a school they can train the staff, they can give everyone the language, have people attend PD, create expectations, put the model in the handbook, and they can still have inconsistent implementation. So, where does the implementation fall flat? Now, I've outlined three things, and the first one being misalignment with professional values. Now, again, this specifically, what I'm about to go into, is based off of my own experience working in schools that follow the BIST model, not necessarily anything that's published or researched. So take this with a grain of salt, but this is what I have experienced and what I have experienced through secondhand conversation, right? But some teaching staff have an issue with removing students from their classrooms. So let me explain what that's supposed to look like, right? We talked about that structured response to behavior. Well, when a student is not complying to whatever instruction they're given, they're supposed to be removed from their original setting. So typically their seat at a table or their regular chair, right? And they're supposed to go to the safe seat. Well, once they're at the safe seat, what they're supposed to do is either fill out a think sheet, think through what could I do differently, right? Think about what feelings brought forth that behavior. This is what we call processing. And if they aren't able to do so, say they're still engaging in the behavior that originally got them moved to the safe seat, then the teacher is supposed to remove them from the classroom community altogether. And either they're going to go to a buddy room or they're going to go to a recovery room where, again, they're supposed to process through that think sheet of like, what are some of the behaviors I could have done instead? X, Y, and Z. Now, if the student does comply, right, say they do the think sheet, they think through the options, they process with an adult, they're supposed to come back to the next step closest to where they just left from. So if they are in the buddy room and they comply, they do their think sheet, they're supposed to go back to the safe seat. From the safe seat, they comply, do what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to go back to their regular seat. But that rarely happens. Okay? There's a lot of reasons why, but that rarely happens. Okay? So, so yes, not only that, but also it just in my own experience, and I've had conversations with teachers who believe that receiving other students is more of a distraction to them. Especially if imagine you are a teacher who you do pretty fine with classroom management, but right next door to you, you have a teacher who is less experienced, really struggles with classroom management, and they're consistently sending their children or students out, right? And it may be multiple students, multiple times within that hour that they have their classroom. That could put stress on the teacher because they're just like, hold on now. You ain't handling stuff over here. And now I'm taking on your I hate to say your mess, right? So when you don't have that alignment, right, to people's professional values, either staff feel like, oh, I don't like the removal of students. That feels like I'm removing them from community. Or you have those that are just like, well, I don't want to take other people's kids. Then what happens is staff start creating their own survival methods. And that might turn into students sending students to the office. That might turn into the teacher continuously calling support staff, even though that's not the structure or the system that has been laid out for all staff to do. And then you got people doing multiple things, and then it starts to fall apart. Now, another reason that implementation with BIST falls apart is that, and this was actually surprising to me, I didn't know this until I read about it yesterday, but there's supposed to be a teaching of pro-social skills. This is like a big part of BIST that I myself have never seen implemented in any of the schools that I've worked in, at least for those that are claiming that, hey, we've adopted the BIST model. So yeah, there's a lack of teaching the pro-social skills. And so we start the year off teaching the principles, I can be okay when others aren't, and I can make good choices even if I'm mad. Most people will do that at the first 2 weeks of like, hey, relationship build. Okay, let's go over the BIST principles or the BIST, blah, blah, blah. People will do that in the first 2 weeks, but then they won't have any type of plan or follow through for the remainder of the school year. You don't hear about those things in November, January, February, not until it's, like I said, a specific behavior incident that happens. And you might hear that language come up in reentry meetings or in a mediation with students, but it's not as proactive as it should be. So, like I said, I found that super interesting because I was like, so we are supposed to be teaching pro social skills. That's interesting. Haven't seen that done yet. But lastly, where I feel like implementation falls apart is that the measurement of success is mostly based on completion. Even the BIST organization itself, if you look and they see that we have evidence based outcomes, right? When I looked to see, it was saying that I want to say somewhere around 95%. I believe it claimed somewhere around like 95% of the people who experience the BIST training, say throughout a school year, can complete a test at the end of the year stating that they know BIST knowledge. But that's almost like having a test saying like, do you like kids? Yes or no. And you could have 100% of your staff saying, yes, I like kids, but then you could still have a staff member who's throwing kids against the wall. So you see what I mean? But even in the strategic plans, I looked and I checked in like neighboring schools, those who claim to follow the BIST model. Okay, well, how are you measuring the success of it? And again, I'm seeing completion of like, oh, they were able to go over the BIST principles, or oh, they were using such and such curriculum that follows BIST principles. Again, completion, but it's hard to verify whether your staff are implementing with fidelity and staff are receiving the training, but again, they may not be absorbing the purpose. Like, why are we doing this? How do we actually do this? Those are two different things. Now, if you were a staff member of a BIST model school, did you also experience gaps in the implementation? Like I said, I saw a lot of the gaps around the teaching of the pro social skills. But you could, like I said, you could have had a really great experience where you like, actually, we were able to do X, Y, and Z just as it was aligned or the way that we were trained. Baby, that was my experience. Okay, several times over. So I'm really just curious. So now, like I said, this is not to say that it does not work. I really do feel like the BIST model actually can work in school settings. But again, implementation is a high factor on whether it's going to be successful or not. But also, side note, I will say that I do feel like there is something to be questioned with the cultural relevancy of BITS, just because of the whole removing the student from their community aspect of it, especially when we're talking about predominantly Black or Brown communities, right? Where our students are Black and Brown. And we know that in those communities, that community is a staple, especially when it comes to positive protective factors, right? So when we talk about removing you from the community, well, what does that look like? Or what outcomes does that bring when you're removing the student from the community and the student may not have felt like there was a community for them in the first place when we're talking about the school community? So either way, but I feel like there's so many other things that you should have a foundation of, even if you're adopting the BIST model, even if you're adopting other models, whether that be conscious discipline, whether that's trauma smart, trauma informed schools, all of that. No matter what model you have, there should be a foundation of some of the practices that you do that help guide you, or like I said, build that foundation around whatever model it is that you're adopting. And this is what I help schools do through the coaching and professional development that I provide. So I created a free survey that walks you through 4 areas, and it helps assess where your student support system is strong and which areas that they might need more attention. So I call it the student support readiness survey. I've been linking it so many times throughout my page, and I'll make sure that I link it down in the comments below once this is wrapped. But again, a free survey, there's 4 different areas and only 12 questions. It doesn't take longer than 5 to 10 minutes. But we're going to talk about some of those right here. Okay. So, what needs to happen beyond adopting your model, right, is that you need to assemble and put together your team, right? Your staff should be collaborating so that they know who is providing support to a student, and so that not one person is handling the teaching of skills alone. I see that so much where it's just like, we're going to hire somebody to do all of the support for students. How can we do that? I talked about that in my first live where I said it shouldn't just be one person's job. But when everybody's collaborating, this also helps predict any additional training that might be needed and any materials that might be necessary for the school year. But also, what needs to happen behind the model is servicing collaboratively. So, kind of the same thing, right? But your supporting staff should make skill building a part of their plan services, especially if you are a school that y'all had kids swinging from the chandeliers last year. You know what I'm talking about. But if you had, like I said, a lot of behavior incidents and things felt out of control, you felt like you were always reactive. Again, skill building should be a part of your support team's plan services, in addition to the other services that they were already doing. But it aligns. Trust me, that's what I posted the tryout mini series about. So, like I said, that's something that should be on their calendar. But another thing that should be happening beyond the model is assessing your school's data. I can't say it enough. Students should be identified early and throughout the school year. So instead of it just being when you do your mental health screener at the beginning of the school year, you might be great and do it in the middle of the school year and at the end of the school year. 3 standpoints, right? But again, if things is off the chain, if it's Chuck E. Cheese in your hallways, then we got to be assessing more quickly. Schools are fast-paced environments, so the assessment of what's going on and what's happening needs to be just as quick and efficient. But also with that assessment is identifying points for evaluation of your school's mental and behavioral health. So again, like a mental health screener is going to give you 1 point, but there's so many other things that you could be looking at, whether it's your attendance, whether it's, again, looking at the trends of why students are coming to counseling, so many different points. Okay. Now, the last one that I'll highlight is intervening. Your school should be intervening on its practices and policies that might cause challenges. So we talk about root cause analysis all the time, right? You could be figuring out and providing interventions for hundreds of students over and over and over. But what happens is it flips your triangle upside down, your MTSS triangle, right? And so you got to figure out, where is this leak? What is it about our practices and what we're doing as a school that are causing these challenges? So again, these are just some of the things, but I list 12 specific questions that are great reflection points on, again, where your student support system is really strong and where there's areas for improvement, because you want to be at a point where your student support system is I don't want to say fully preventative, because there's always going to be a portion that is reactive, but it should be balanced. Okay. And right now I know that a lot of schools, we heavy in the reaction. Okay. So we got to get more to the proactive. I actually have a resource, a free resources that I'm going to drop down in the comments as well, that talks about tier 1 strategies that teachers can use in the classroom. Especially, this was great for admin if you have a K-8 setting where your teachers are calling the walkie quite a bit. They might be calling your phones, trying to get you to take students from the classroom, sending them out quite a bit. Like I said, I have a free resource that talks about what they could be doing preventatively, how they can support students before we even get to that point of a student have to be removed from the classroom. So I want to know from you, does your staff feel ready to implement a behavior model, or are some foundational ideals or practices missing? Again, does your staff feel ready to implement a behavior model, or are some foundational ideals or practices missing? Because I feel like sometimes it's like you come into a school, they say that they're adopting a model, and then people are scared to back up and assess, maybe we're not ready yet. I remember my principal having a conversation with me my first year, and he had brought up, I want to say, Leader in Me. And he was like, do you think this is something that would be helpful for our staff? And I said, do I think it'll be helpful? Yes. I said, do I think our staff is ready for it? No. I said, these people don't even read emails yet. So I was like, we can get there, but we not there yet. No tea, no shade, because I love y'all. But y'all know y'all was not reading emails quite yet. So again, if you want to think more about this and assess where you're at, that student support readiness survey is free. It'll be down in the comments, and I'm looking forward to see what your results are, what this brings up for you as far as, because I know, look, some of y'all have started school already. So again, this is the opportunity for you to kind of get ahead of the game, or try to get in front of the madness after the honeymoon phase, right? But like I said, let me know. I'm curious to know if you are still implementing the BIST model at your school, if you have experienced it in the past. What has been your experience with it? I thank you so much for joining me for this live. I look forward to your comments and your discussion, and I will see you guys next Wednesday.